What's going on, everybody? My name is Greg Peters. You are watching the Car Passion channel, and today I will be using my brand new engine crane to pull the engine out of my Miata. So for anyone who did miss my last video, let me summarize it for you in 5 seconds. Basically, car go fast, car brake. And I have not been able to exactly pinpoint the problem, so I have exhausted my diagnostic skill and will now be pulling the engine out and taking it apart to hope I find what's wrong. So thank you guys for going on this journey with me. Let's get started. To get the day started, let's move this orange engine off to the side. I still don't know what vehicle I'm gonna put this thing in yet when I finish it, but that's to be decided later. Once that's out of the way and my engine stand is freed up, I can start working on the VVT Beast. I pulled the transmission and clutch in my last video, so that step is already done and I get to move on to the engine work. Now, even though my Miata is lightly modified, the steps required to remove the engine are essentially the same, even if you're following along at home with a stock Miata. You need to remove the flywheel to put the engine on a stand, so I knocked that out first, then remove the motor mount nuts, drain the coolant, drain the oil, and remove the radiator. Next up, I disconnected everything that connects the engine to the vehicle. I started with my catch can lines and intercooler piping, then the connectors for the VVT solenoid and throttle position sensor. Now, if it's your first time doing this, now would be a great time to start labeling things as you disconnect them using masking tape and a Sharpie. Taking plenty of pictures along the way can also be very helpful. Now, normally I would just unplug the fuel injectors here and pull that harness out of the way, but because I have a unique combination of a Skunk 2 intake manifold with an NB cylinder head, the plugs are actually very difficult to access, so it's easier to just remove the entire fuel rail. Make sure you depressurize the fuel system before you pull the rail off or disconnect any fuel lines. Next, I unplug the ignition coils along with other miscellaneous sensors and vacuum lines. To lift the engine, just use a chain along with some bolts and washers to secure it to the engine lift hooks. Please make sure you're using high-grade hardware here and an adequately strong chain for this. Next, hook up your engine hoist and start slowly lifting the engine up, checking all around it every couple inches to make sure nothing is getting caught up. And when you get the engine all the way out and it's just kind of suspended up in the air, I highly advise not hanging out underneath it, just in case. If you do happen to have a K-Power Industries transmission swap kit, now would be the time to remove that adapter plate. In order to bolt on the engine stand, you might need to buy some long bolts that match the thread pitch of the stock transmission bolts. You can use the threaded holes in the oil pan, but I know I'll be removing this, so I'm only going to use holes in the block. After all of the bolts are snugged down, slip the base of the engine stand on, lower the crane, and disconnect it. And anyone that's ever done this before probably knows the feeling, but I just love having an engine on a stand where you have access to all the parts, good lighting, and it should be relatively easy to locate the part of this engine that finally just had enough of my 30 PSI shenanigans. What? What the? I mean, it's never a good thing when that's in your oil pan. Okay, at this very moment, I do not remember where those bolts came from or what they hold together, but I get the feeling I'm about to find out. Those 4 bolts came out of the main bearing support plate. You can see the 4 in the back are still there. Those right there. And those just fell out, but those are just sitting down in the oil pan. That's not gonna make a bunch of clatter and everything, so I guess I'll keep going deeper and just see what I find. Whoa! Oh my god. Oh my god. Oh my god. Hey guys, how's it going? Now seems like a better time than ever to remind you that if you do use my link down in the description, you can save yourself $50 off your first purchase with HP Academy. What is HP Academy? Well, I'm glad you asked. See, it's kind of like an online school, except instead of learning about pronouns and verbs and American history, you get to learn about building race cars the right way. I'm talking suspension setups, EFI tuning, and engine building, which I might need to take a refresher course on myself soon. But anyways, that's beside the point. If you do buy any of their courses, you're supporting HPA, you're supporting Car Passion, and most importantly, you're supporting building race cars. So I wish you guys the best of luck on all of your projects. And now, back to the video. What the... There it is, boys. That is 3 visibly broken main caps. Well, yeah, that'll definitely make some kind of knocking noise. That's incredible. Let me get some better light on this. All right, I gotta pull these things off and check out what they look like. Can check the condition of the bearings as well. You know, I never said I was going for the most reliable Miata. You guys know that. I'm all about pushing the limits, finding the weak points, and now hopefully I will save someone who is building a high horsepower Miata engine this headache, because they will get billet main caps to begin with, and they will have the extreme peace of mind that they will not have to worry about breaking their main caps. Ooh, this is gonna be cool. Oh my god. Yep, we got 2-piece mains, boys. There we go. The underside actually looks good. Looks like the bearing did not spin. That is insane. You can see there's definitely a line where the cap broke, but it's still, oh yeah, it did wear down a little bit. I can feel a little roughness with my fingernail. That's of course the back of the bearing that I'm feeling, so it really doesn't matter, I guess. So the journal of the crank actually looks completely fine. And then there's the wear surface of the bearing. I'm no expert, but it looks to be okay. Obviously there's some wear going on, but I don't know how much is normal. Obviously I'm gonna do new bearings anyways, but it's definitely not trashed. I just want to give a massive shout out to ARP here. These studs, no pun intended, held this motor together. Even though the caps were broken, the studs still held the pieces in place and didn't literally let the crankshaft fall out of the block. And I want you to listen to this clip of the final pull with enhanced engine bay audio and realize that these things let go in the beginning of 4th gear, and the engine still held together through full power in 5th gear, as well as the entire 30-mile drive home. I know people have had similar failures before where they were using stock main bolts that broke, which caused the caps to break, but I don't recall ever seeing anyone break main caps that were secured with ARP studs. So this message is to everyone building BPs for big power. Billet main caps is something you want to consider. Fortunately, there is a company who makes these called Mazworx, and what I learned from my recent conversation with them is they do have a few sets available that are just kind of collecting dust because no one ever thinks about breaking their mains, but I've got people in my DMs with bare blocks talking about putting down some pretty serious numbers in the future, so consider investing in these if you fall into that category. Let it go on record that it is very possible to break BP main caps. Now, as of recording this video, I have not received my main caps, so I can't show them off quite yet, but in the next video, we'll be able to take a closer look at those and go a bit more in depth. So although it is going to be pretty expensive for all the machine work, seals, gaskets, piston rings, and whatever else I'm going to need to replace, I'm kind of glad this happened. Maybe I can save a couple engines out there. I know it's not the highest horsepower Miata engine ever built, but it's got to be one of the only BPs to make 400 foot-pounds of torque at the wheels by 4,300 RPM. And that low to mid-range RPM torque is exceptionally hard on engine and drivetrain parts, so this continues to be a build about finding limits, and I hope it's helpful to all the people out there striving to take their Miatas beyond the norm. So 3 broken main caps. Definitely not the failure I was ever expecting to see on this engine, but I want you to remember that the red car has never been about just building the most reliable engine. It's been about taking the entire setup as a whole, pushing it to the limit, replacing that limiting part, and then pushing the whole setup further. Whether it's breaking transmissions, running the turbo out of air and needing to go bigger, running the injectors out of fuel and having to upsize those, or reaching the strength limit of the cast iron that holds the entire rotating assembly in place. So the accepted limit of the stock main caps, even with ARP main studs, is between 450 and 500 foot-pounds of torque, and this engine is a perfect example that that's about all you're gonna get out of them. So if you are building a BP that's gonna make big power and specifically big torque, 400 plus foot-pounds, you're gonna wanna consider billet main caps. Now, unfortunately, to install new main caps, the block does need to be torn all the way down and go to the machine shop. If you simply throw on a new set of main caps, whether it's aftermarket or main caps from a different engine, you do need to get the block machined, because the way they do it from factory and the way you need to do it if you replace your main caps is the main caps get torqued into the block, and then they run essentially a giant drill bit through all the mains to make sure the hole through the block, through all 5 mains, is perfectly straight and perfectly sized, so the crankshaft sits just right and your bearing clearances are all correct. If you simply throw on new main caps, there's pretty much no way that your bearing clearances are going to be right, so unfortunately this does require full teardown. Now, for fans of the NB Miata project, I don't want this to take away too much from that project. It seems like every time I release a video about the NB and say, yeah, I'm going gung-ho, I'm going to jump back into this project, the red car has some kind of episode, almost like it's jealous of the NB. So I don't have some crazy extravagant video series planned for this engine rebuild. If you want to see content like that, you can always re-watch my rebirth series on the red Miata, the initial 400 horsepower build. I'm going to be doing basically the same thing again, just reconstructing this engine. I will have some videos on it and I'll keep you guys updated. And I also post some smaller updates that don't always make it into my YouTube videos on my Instagram page, so if you're interested in that kind of stuff, you can follow me there. And I do plan on just putting this engine back together exactly the way it was, just with stronger main caps. I don't need to do anything to get more power out of it. The thing has plenty of power as it is, and I really haven't even had a chance to enjoy it yet. So anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope you learned something from it, and as always, I will catch you in the next one. Peace out. Yeah, you're kind of getting in the shot there, buddy.